Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our March IAC meeting. It's very good to see all of our members today. Bob, do you want to do a countdown with our membership, or Elliot, or want to do that? That would be great. Whomever.
I can, or Elliot, if you'd like to.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, we'll do. Secretary McCord?
Here.
Linda Eberhardt?
Here.
And I understand, Clarence, you're sitting in for Secretary Churchill. Clarence Felder?
Here.
Brian Gibbons?
Here.
Dick Lombardo?
Here.
Senator Lala? Senator Lala, can you hear me?
I can. I've got on mute. Here.
Okay, super. And Denise Avera?
Here.
Secretary Casemeyer?
Here.
And Chair Salmon?
Here.
You have a full quorum.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. And it's really, again, nice to see you. And it's another sunny day outside and hopefully a nice day. So I'm going to turn it over to our executive director to make a comment.
Yes, thank you. We have one piece of written testimony from Comico, and they are requesting that when this money comes from the Build to Learn Act, which is not available yet, we're studying that with MSA, trying to figure out exactly when those bonds can be sold, how many, when it can be available. So it's a work in progress. We'll be reporting out much more to you by next meeting, I do hope. But they are saying that they have needs for those dollars whenever they become available, and they wanted to make sure that you knew that their need was very high. We've heard the same from most of the other LEAs, and that we had a meeting with the planners yesterday, and advised them the same, that as soon as we know more, we'll get it out to everybody. But we'll be developing the procedures and how that we will work this with you. Since this is number 2 item on the agenda, I won't go into any depth because Cassandra's going to report it out quite well. I also wanted to announce, Madam Chair, that the governor has amended his executive order of June 19th of 2020. Secretary McCord brought this to my attention. I thank you, Secretary. The order has allowed us to extend certain performance dates of certain IAC allocations, and this provision ends June 30th. Therefore, we'll begin to look cautiously at any allocations that may expire and prepare an agenda item for your consideration at your April meeting, so that we have policy in place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. All right, now we're going to move into, we have any public comment today?
No public comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, well, thank you very much. So now I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
All right, so moved by Mr. Gibbons. Second.
Second. Whatever.
Mr. Lombardo. All in favor, please say or show aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Mr. Schoen?
The motion passed unanimously.
Wonderful.
Can you tell me who was the second, please? I missed.
Mr. Lombardo.
And the first was Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move to the second part of our agenda today on the Build to Learn Act. Mr. Gorel just did a nice little cue set for Cassandra to explain this, and that's found on pages 27 through 43 of your agenda packet. And I'm going to turn it over. Good morning, Cassandra. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Madam Chair. And I miss those sounds of sirens from the building. It's always nice to hear those on meeting days. So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The Built to Learn Act of 2020 became enacted on February 12th of this year. Because the bill was introduced last year, the effective dates of most of the provisions of the bill is June 1st, 2020, which of course passed quite some time ago. So today I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the major provisions of the bill that impact the IAC programs, policies, and regulations specifically. The bill, I think, was around 60 pages. I'm not going to go into a great level of detail of every provision of the bill, but I wanted to highlight the ones that are going to impact your programs. So I'm beginning on page 29 of your agenda. And on this page, you're going to see that the first and major thing that the bill does is it allows MSA, the Maryland Stadium Authority, to sell special revenue bonds of up to $2.2 billion to fund public school construction. It's really important to note that the amount actually sold is going to be dependent upon the available cash for debt service that the debt service can support. So statute does require that certain LEAs receive specific percentages of the total allocation, and those are seen in the middle column on the left-hand side of this page. The amounts in the right-hand column are meant to give an idea of anticipated funding, but those amounts are not definite. They will be adjusted based upon the actual revenue bond proceeds. The program will be governed by an MOU between the IAC and MSA, and subsequently MSA and the LEAs will each enter into a project MOU for every project that is funded through this act. The Build to Learn funding can be used in combination with other programs, but it is required to comply with IAC regulations. After a project is approved, those projects will be administered by MSA unless MSA grants permission to an LEA to carry out the project themselves. So I'm going to move on to page 30 of your agenda. One big difference between the Built to Learn funding and the IAC's regular CIP funding is that the IAC is required to approve Built to Learn funding on a rolling basis. The statute also specifically requires that the IAC give priority to projects that are a B status in this year's CIP. The IAC cannot reimburse for a facility that has already been completed, but can reimburse for projects that began after June 1 of 2020. And I will say that as staff, we're looking carefully at these two provisions to see what projects are going to fall in that window. There's also a provision that in certain instances, a project may be eligible for additional square footage than is currently allowed by the gross area baselines. We're working on identifying what projects that might apply to. Moving on to page 31. This funding also comes with some required reporting. Every year on January 15th, MSA is required to report to the governor and the General Assembly on the status of the program, and they're also required to complete a 10-year evaluation of this program in 2030. And the IAC is subsequently required to report on that evaluation to the governor and the General Assembly. So looking at page 32, a particularly timely portion of the bill requires that the IAC adopt regulations to make planning and design costs eligible. You all will remember that we presented a proposal to you at your February meeting to proceed with regulatory changes to allow design funding. And at your direction, we were proceeding with those changes. Now the statute does actually require that those changes take place. And those changes are on the next item of your agenda, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Those changes are also going to include state and local cost shares, which takes us to page 33 of this presentation. House Bill 1, or the Built to Learn Act, requires that the IAC adopt its actual and specific state cost shares into the regulation. So in the past few years, we've adopted them and we've published them and posted them to our website, but we haven't codified them in COMAR. We're now required to do that. But the bill also requires that the cost shares that are adopted in COMAR have to be the cost shares as produced by the formula. So you'll remember that beginning in 2017 for fiscal year 2019, the Board of Public Works and the IAC have chosen to hold harmless LEAs that would have seen a state cost share decrease under the formula. We looked at this language very carefully and we did consult with Elliott. And we believe that this new language takes away the IAC's discretion to hold harmless LEAs that would see a decrease. Looking at page 34, the language does add a special provision regarding the state cost share for counties that meet certain criteria that are described in this slide. Right now, Garrett is the only county that meets that criteria. And based upon this provision, their state cost share will increase from the calculated 50% to, and there's actually a typo on this slide, 89 was their cost share in FY22. Their cost share is calculated for FY23 is 90%. So it would increase from 50 to 90. Looking at page 35, the Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classrooms program allocates funding based upon a formula to LEAs that exceed a certain amount of enrollment growth or that have a 5-year average of at least 300 relocatables. House Bill 1 reduced that threshold from 300 relocatables to 250 relocatables. So as a result, Baltimore County will become eligible for EGRC funding in FY 2022. And we're going to include the necessary adjustments to accommodate that in the CIP approvals that you'll make in May. The bill also increases the mandatory EGRC calculation from $40 million to $80 million starting in fiscal year 2026. On page 36, you'll see that House Bill 1 provides for Prince George's to receive funding for their public-private partnerships in lieu of their share of the Built to Learn funding. So when we start approving these House Bill 1 projects, there won't be any for Prince George's. They will still continue to receive projects under the CIP. In order for Prince George's to meet the requirements of the legislation, they have to enter into a P3 with at least 6 schools, and that agreement has to be reviewed by MSA and approved by the IAC. And then, of course, there are some annual reporting requirements for that as well. Moving to page 37, and I know this is a lot of information. Thank you all. You'll see that the bill reconstitutes the assessment and funding work group and requires that they submit their final report by December 1 of this year. On page 38, you'll see that the bill extends the Healthy School Facility Fund program. This program was originally due to sunset in fiscal year 21, but this bill extends the program through fiscal year 24. It does increase the funding for a couple of years, and it does require that for fiscal years 21 through 24, that Baltimore City receive at least half of the funding. On page 39, you'll see that the bill also creates the Public School Facilities Priority Fund. The fund begins in fiscal year 25 with a mandatory allocation of $40 million, and it is intended to be used to fund the schools that are identified by the statewide school facilities assessment that we're conducting right now as having the highest needs. And that fund does increase to a mandatory $80 million starting in fiscal year 27. On page 40, the bill allows the IAC to adopt regulations that require the use of a standard CMMS system or a computerized maintenance management system. On page 41, the bill requires that either the IAC or MSA evaluate the life cycle costs of public school facilities over 50 years, and that they report to the General Assembly both on the effort to do that every year and then on the final evaluation in October of 2023. And finally, on page 42, the bill requires that MSDE, the IAC, and MSA collaborate with the LEAs and community colleges to develop a CTE program or apprenticeship pathway in school building maintenance. So this, as I said, is a very large bill with a lot of provisions. Today, I really just wanted to give you a high-level overview. As Bob mentioned, we have been working really closely with MSA, and we've been looking at each provision in this bill and what will be necessary to implement those provisions. We'll bring each of these to you in far greater detail, piece by piece, as we get those ready over the coming months. We're definitely still working to develop some of the finer details of this implementation. So with that, I can stand for questions, but I do also want to remind all of the members that as your staff, we're always at your disposal if you have any questions that you want to discuss in greater detail.
Thank you, Cassandra. That was really a very good presentation, and the PowerPoint was very helpful in breaking down the components of this very, very large comprehensive bill. Are there questions at this point for Cassandra? Seeing none, that means you did an excellent job of explaining this. So I'm going to walk us now into section 3 of our agenda, which is the adoption of the proposed COMAR revisions, including fiscal year 2023 and 2024 state share costs.
Madam Chair, I think one of your members, Linda Epperts, had her hand up.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
Yes, before we start this section, I would like to recommend that we take a pause on this plan for the COMAR and the new adjusted formulas. And there's 3 reasons that I think we should just pause it for a month. That I spent a good hour with wonderful staff trying to get answers, and I got lots, and more I looked at it, there are more questions. I understand that comments haven't been able to be received by the locals because it just went out to everyone. So I think we really should have comments before we even consider this. Second reason, I think we should see what the president of the Senate, Senator Ferguson, and the legislature plans to do if they're making any adjustments to this plan. And we would know this during the next month. So waiting until April would give us an ability to see what's happening so we don't have to go back and change it. And the third thing is the pandemic has changed all of our lives and ability, if it's the wealth of the county or anything else. And in some additional time, even if it's a month, things are rapidly changing and we might have a better sense of what's going to be. So I would suggest that we take a pause on this issue until next month.
Go ahead, Mr. Gorell.
Yeah, Madam Chair, for clarity, this only begins the public review process. So we would have time, I believe, if the chair and the members decided to move this forward. I think it would allow the generation of the public comments to start to flow for later consideration.
Yeah, I was going to just say, thank you, Linda, for that. This is not adopting anything that's in stone. This is to start the process of review in regulations, just like as we do with any other proposed regulation. So let's go ahead and hear what it is first, and then we can have additional discussion. So Cassandra, will you review these proposed revisions? Again, the word is proposed. It's not adopting anything that is going to, it has to go through the process, which is a very rigorous one for final adoption. This is found on pages 44 through 65 of your agenda. So I will now turn it back over to Cassandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, this item proposes to amend our existing COMAR to comply with the changes in House Bill 1 and also includes adoption of the proposed new state cost shares as calculated. I'm going to go over the majority of the COMAR revisions, and then Kim is going to step in to help with the state cost share calculations. The primary change in this document is to modify our regulations to allow planning and design as required by the bill. When you're looking at the document, italics represent additions to the existing text and brackets represent deletions. We've also highlighted all of the changes to make them easier to see. And you'll remember that you approved some COMAR revisions at your February meeting. Most of those were technical in nature. But because you can't have multiple revisions to the same section of COMAR that are going through that Division of State Documents review process at the same time, we held those revisions with the idea that we may be submitting them with these proposed revisions that you may take action on today. So anywhere that these revisions were in the text, We have shaded those in gray so that you would be able to see what you have already acted on in context with today's proposed changes. So beginning on page 46 of your agenda, the proposed COMAR revisions add a new approval pathway for planning and design funding. We wanted to maximize LEA flexibility. So instead of replacing the locally funded design option, we have added to it with a state funded design option. So under B1, you'll see that we've added the requirements for planning and design funding approval. And then under B2, we are deleting a lot of those requirements for local planning, but only because we've cross-referenced them to B1. So those requirements all stay in place. I just want to point that out because I know it looks like a deletion, but it's really just a cross-reference. On page 47, you just see minor changes to cross-references and citations. And Kim is going to come back to the cost shares on page 48. So if you guys don't mind, I would like to move you ahead to the maximum state construction allocations on page 49. And these are just some clarifications, again, to allow for design funding. The real meat of this change is on page 51 of your agenda. And this is where we lay out the allocation for planning and design funding, which simply cannot exceed 10% of the anticipated eligible project amount. Further down the page in regulations 11 and 12, you'll see that we've modified the current eligible and ineligible expenditures to allow for those expenses to take place. There are a lot of other pages in this document, but the modifications that you see in those are really just to cross-references and minor technical changes. So with that, I can turn it over to Kim to do the much more complex part of this presentation.
Thank you, Cassandra. So in accordance with the statute, the IAC is required to establish and regulation a state and local cost share formula for each county that identifies the factors used in establishing the formula and the actual state and local cost share percentages produced by the formula for each county. The factors that determine the formula, which results in the state cost share percentages, are found on page 49, as Cassandra mentioned, COMAR Section 5 state cost share percentages. The control years that are used in the basis for the data and the state per pupil foundation figures are shown on page 64 of your agenda. The percentages before the IAC for adoption are applicable to FY 2023 and the FY 2024 funding programs. The percentages are identified for each fiscal year and are updated every 2 years. I want to mention that this calculation is a collaborative process involving the staff of the Maryland State Department of Education and the Department of Commerce. IAC staff also coordinate with each LEA to collect certain information used in the formula. The results of the formula are found on pages 55, as if we could scroll there in the agenda, and each LEA's state share percentage is shown in the second column from the right, titled The Percentage of State Share with Add-ons 50% Minimum. Before we talk about the state share percentage results, I'll take you briefly through the factors used, which start with the base percentage or the state share of the foundation program, to which up to 6 separate add-on components are applied. The workbook is provided, and it's on pages 55 through 65 in the agenda. Page 56 provides the base percentage figure and is the school system's state share of the Bridge to Excellence Foundation program. This program provides the basic state funding for local school systems. The program is wealth equalized so that systems with lower property and income wealth receive more state aid and vice versa. State percentages in the base vary from a minimum share of 15% to over 75%, with Somerset at the highest of 76.1%. You will notice that 3 LEAs, Calvert, Carroll, and St. Mary's, do not have add-ons, so the percentage is equal to the base percentage in the foundation program formula. And 6 LEAs, that result in a percentage lower than the 50% minimum, so their percentage is set at the minimum. The add-on components, which begin on page 57, is the guaranteed tax base add-on. This is another Bridge to Excellence state aid program. It's designed to provide aid to low wealth jurisdictions where the county is providing a higher than required school funding level. This is for the operating budget. The guaranteed tax base divided by the full foundation program. The add-on is the percentage that the program represents relative to the program. 8 LEAs were eligible for this add-on, with Somerset having the highest at 8.9%. Page 58, the free and reduced price meals add-on, there are 12 LEAs eligible for this add-on. Farms eligibility is used in the state aid calculations as a proxy for students requiring additional resources due to economic disadvantage. The add-on formula compares the local percentage of farms to the statewide percentage. The add-on is 20% of the amount above the state average. On page 59, the Tier 1 county add-on are associated with the One Maryland tax credits and based upon components of the statutory definition of a qualified distressed county. Eligible counties receive an increase of 5% for each add-on. 5.1 was the unemployment figure, and the median household income was $84,000. Tier 1 counties, on page 60, I guess if we'll move there to that portion of the calculation, is the 5-year enrollment growth add-on. It provides an add-on if the 5-year enrollment growth as used in the Bridge to Excellence Foundation program exceeds the statewide growth. The statewide percentage is at 3.8%. This is calculated by subtracting the statewide enrollment growth from the local enrollment growth. The add-on is the amount above the state average. There's no reduction if there's a negative. Page 61, local effort. The staff of the IAC obtained the debt as of June 30th, 2019, and the PAYGO information from all LEAs for fiscal years 2017 through 2019. This figure is compared to local wealth as used in the Bridge to Excellence Foundation program. To the extent that this figure exceeds 1% of the wealth, the excess is multiplied by 10 and becomes the add-on. Page 62 provides a historical summary of the percentages just for information purposes. And then page 63 compares the previous calcs to this period, keeping in mind that these figures compare the differences between the figures as calculated, not as held harmless by the final action of the IAC. Page 64, again, I said that earlier, provide the fiscal years and the per pupil foundation figure that is used in the calculations. So if we go back to page 45, the final calculations that result from the base program and all of the add-ons are shown here in the agenda item for the IAC's adoption. I just want to point out that in the summary, you'll see that 8 LEAs have an increase in the state share, 11 remain at the previous percentage, and 5 will decrease. You will notice that the decreases for Baltimore City and Carroll County are phased in over the 2 fiscal years so that no LEA receives more than a 5% reduction in any 1 year. This is in accordance with COMAR. The cost share for Garrett is adjusted to equal the state cost share of the adjacent Allegheny County to meet the requirements of the Built to Learn Act, as Cassandra described in the previous item. The state percentage is the total of the base percentage and any eligible add-ons for which the county qualifies. Each component is calculated in tenths of a percent, summed, and then the total was rounded to the nearest whole percent. Okay. Are there any questions?
Questions for Kim or Cassandra on the regulations or the cost share projections?
I have a question. This is Gloria Lawler.
Go ahead, Senator.
I noticed Baltimore was being dropped by 9 percentage points over a 2-year period. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
That's huge. I don't know what is this something they're
So
on their budget for years and budget and tax? I cannot imagine 9 percentage. What is it? Even though I know you say that they can go up, it cannot exceed. Did you say 5% a year on the COMA?
cannot be reduced. It doesn't reduce more than 5%. Yes, and that's where you see that they've gone down to 91% because they're.
I don't know what the feds are sending in to the states. I mean, what's going to end up, how they're going to make those adjustments. But personally, right now, I don't understand how they're going to absorb that. Maybe they know. Maybe they've told you, and I don't know. Maybe you can tell me what they say. I have no idea. It just doesn't seem in line.
Yeah, and it's
not with Baltimore City. Are we talking about Baltimore City?
yes.
Yeah. Oh no. Unless it's something I don't know.
So Director,
did they sign off on this, or do they have to sign off on it? How does it work?
so can I have Director Gorell respond to this?
Thank you.
Historically, we have deferred these decreases over the last 2 years, and it's now in the law that we have to do what we have to do, and so and maybe the director can explain this better, but with the counterbalancing of the amount of money that is in the Build to Learn Act for some of the counties and not other the counties through the CIP, I think it will balance itself out more than that you think. And so I'm going to just turn it back to Bob and see if he can explain that a little bit. This really relates to only the CIP, Bob, correct?
No, and Madam Chair, it will also relate to the Build to Learn.
All right, thank you for correcting me then.
Yes, and so the local share is, it will be more difficult for Baltimore City. We, of course, studied this very carefully to understand why this came about. The calculations are historical. They're put in place a long time ago. And we have repeated them. An IAC, I can't tell you the date, maybe Kim can, that it was originally put into calculation. As you can hear, many of the components of this are also used in the funding formula on the educational side. So it's a carry through applying many of the same things. But what the city actually reported to us is what we went back and checked. Some of their PAYGOR, essentially their cash investments in can reduce. And we knew on the 21st Century program, for instance, that they had come up with 2/3 of that through local sources. And we wanted to make sure that we had everything covered. Kim, could you explain the diligence that we used as we went through Baltimore City's particularly? We did everybody, but we went back and triple checked Baltimore City.
Yes, that is correct. I verified that the outstanding bond debt information that was provided from the city came from the city, and then also Baltimore City's school system has the ability to issue bonds. And so we did capture both of those figures in our outstanding bond debt. And then we also confirmed twice with them regarding their PAYGO expenditures for fiscal year 17 through 19. Part of the reduction for Baltimore City that's different from the last time we calculated when they resulted in 96% is the tier 1 county add-on. Last time we calculated it in 2018, there was a 10% add-on for those two factors. This year, they only received the 5% add-on. So that might be a little bit of the difference of their reduction also.
And one of the questions, Madam Chair, if I could continue, one of the questions that has come up many times to us, so we dug into that also, are the TIF type programs, that are a waiver of property tax, for a developed area in order to benefit long term the renewal or regentrification of particular areas mostly. And those are also considered in this calculation. Could you explain, Kim?
So in the base formula, those the TIF is included. There is an adjustment for that, and that's in the state share of the foundation formula in this document. That is considered. And there's an add-on for that for Baltimore City and Prince George's County into those figures.
Are you saying they have a robust TIF in those two places? Is this I guess I know about Prince George's old TIF and all the problems they're having with it, okay?
Yeah. And I'm not an expert in that area to explain it, but in the calculation, there is a consideration.
Madam Chair, I guess I just have an unreadiness on the 9%. I'm listening to everything that was done. The staff has done its homework. I can see that. I guess I want to hear from the people in Baltimore. I can call. It's okay. When I get off the meeting, I'll call them and find out what the heck is going on. But if they're fine with it, guess what? I am. They just need to say something. But 9%.
Yeah, Madam Chair, again, this is a proposed regulation change. So they certainly will have the opportunity to respond to everything.
Linda's got her hand up.
Linda?
Yes, I mean, I served on the state board for 4 years, and we never sent out any proposed regulations for Comar until we had the input and suggestions and thoughts of everyone. And it just seems like we need to have that piece before we can even say, let's go forward, to have a complete picture of what's going to happen. Because more we hear, that's good. Let's get all of our questions answered before we go out with this. This is already out there. So now let's give the counties and everyone else that's involved an opportunity to say, okay, what do we need to, change, tweak, or, anything else? So that's why my suggestion, it is of pausing, because it is a massive change because of the new regulations.
So let me just again, when we do propose regulations, the process is to get public and stakeholder input and feedback, and that is the process that we use. We have a motion. We can determine how the rest of the group feels. So I would like Cassandra to read the motion, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, Madam Chair. The motion is to approve a proposed Comar change to number 1, recodify existing regulations 14390208, 9, 13, 16, and 19, and 21 through 30 to be regulations 14390209, 10, 14, 17, 20, and 22 through 31, respectively. And to approve amendments to Comar 14.39.02, 03, 05, and 06. Third, to amend and recodify existing regulations 14.39.02, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 17, 18, and 20 to be regulations 14.39.02, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 18, 19, and 21, respectively. And to adopt new regulation 14390208, early planning and design funding allocation, and finally to authorize staff to make additional technical edits as necessary.
Madam Chair, could I make a comment?
I'm sorry, I called on Senator Casemeyer and I
Yes.
was mute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if we support the motion as was just read, then we're not we're disregarding Ms. Everhart's proposal that we wait. Is that the summation of what we're doing?
No,
If we support the motion, I thought Ms. Everhart asked for a delay in doing this.
that's
my
correct.
question.
You're free to vote the motion the way you want
No,
to.
that's what I'm saying. That's the net effect is all I'm saying is.
Yes.
Okay.
The effect is that we would proceed to put these out for public comment.
Thank you.
That's what the motion is. And Bob,
Okay.
did you want to make a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I want you to know that we can bring this back to you and revise it in any way. And then you can put it back out again. We've already held one previously that you had approved so that we could wrap it in together. The bottom line is that we just need to have something by June when we move forward into the next CIP period. It might be a time for the IAC to open this up and look at the entire formula again. We've done that a lot with the way the CIP process works. And this may not be doing what is needed today. It may have worked quite well in the past, but that's going to be a big job. It will take a lot of study and certainly a lot of public input back and forth if you were to want to redo the funding formula. But it is something we could do. It's probably not something that we can shoot for this particular cycle. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Gibbons.
I'm still a bit confused on exactly what we're voting on and what the result would be. Are we voting to table this for 30 days or are we voting to move forward?
No, we're voting to put it out for public comment and stakeholder input.
Okay.
Madam Chair, would you like for me to describe what happens with a proposed regulation,
Yes,
how
I
it
think-
goes through the
I
process?
think that would be a good idea because many of us are very familiar with the process and it would be good for the public to hear as well. So thank you for that suggestion.
Of course, Madam Chair, it's not a process that I think most of the public are familiar with. When an organization takes the action to approve a proposed COMAR change, that regulation is then submitted to the Division of State Documents, and it is published in a document that's called the Maryland Register, which releases biweekly. Every 2 weeks, they put out a new edition, and that launches a 30-day public comment period during which the IAC would receive public comments from anyone who is interested in submitting those. After that public comment period has closed, we would look carefully at the public comment we received. We would work with the Assistant Attorney General, and we would come back to you either for revisions to what we had originally proposed based upon the public comment we received, or for final adoption of the regulations. After that final adoption occurs, if it occurs, it is then published again in the Maryland Register, and it becomes regulation 10 days after that publication. So this process takes several months and does include some built-in time for public comment.
If we go out with public comment now and we want to make any changes, then we have to go back out and republish it, correct? For another 30 days.
That is correct.
It depends though, and I'll let Mr. Schoen chime in. It depends if the changes are substantive or not. If they're not substantive, they do not have to go back out again. Correct, Mr. Schoen?
That is correct. If there are, after public comment, let me put on my camera. After public comment, if the regulations come back and the commission wants to have any substantive changes, yes, the process would have to start over again. It would have to go back to DSD. It would also have to go to the AELR Legislative Committee for review, and then it would go back out for public comment as well. But that is, as Dr. Salmon said, that is for if any substantive changes are made, not just technical changes or typos or things like that.
Other questions? Secretary McCord?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I wondered if Elliot, would you consider any changes in those numbers for the formula to be substantive changes?
Most likely, because that would be changing, probably the funding formula itself.
Right, okay. That would start another iteration of the process.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so what's your pleasure? Senator Casemeyer.
Madam Chair, I understand the implications that was mentioned previously, the TIF legislation that's occurred in the past and the implications that has. But the reality of it is, it just seems difficult for me to understand how Baltimore is going to be able to afford this additional expense, regardless of what the formula says. It just is not realistic in terms of the real world. That's sort of how I see it.
So, Senator, do you have a suggestion?
No, I was going to support Ms. Everhart's perspective and just have a staff review somehow to go back and look at this number and see if it, really can work. To me, to put in a number that Baltimore can't realistically meet is, what are we doing?
Other comments? Senator McCord.
I'll just take secretary for now, but that's fine.
I'm sorry, my screen, you're together, so I'm morphing
Gotcha.
your titles. Sorry about that.
No, that's not. It's actually a compliment. I don't mind it. It's beyond Baltimore City though. We have at least Carroll, Hartford, and Cecil that are basically losing funding also, and they are in a sense they're still growing. So it's a little bit. It's stark to see it. I give due credit to all the diligence of the staff. I really wouldn't imagine we would find a mathematical error in what they've put together, because I think they're that good. I really do. There's a part of me that thinks if we approve everything except for 05B4, which is this piece of it, then everything else that we had proposed a while ago about how we get things straightened out in Comar can start a process. We just have to decide for ourselves, do we want this discussion to happen in response to these regulations, or do we want this discussion to happen with us either internally or at this level before they're published? And discussion is going to happen either way. And whether we are predisposed to make any additions or corrections or review of this because it's a published thing with a 30-day deadline, or it's because we've given ourselves another 30 days to look at it. I don't know that we would come up with anything different in 30 days that we wouldn't have to put in here, but there's a part of me that thinks that if we bifurcate it, right.
Let me make a suggestion. Why don't we modify the motion to exclude the section on the percentages, put everything else out, and then come back again in April and talk about the percentages after the staff has had time to review the concerns that have been expressed today by members of the IAC. Would that be palatable?
I like that better.
Sounds good.
I can't imagine putting this sucker out with that 9%. I'm telling you, I don't want anyone clobbering me. Madam Chair Lady, they'll be coming over here getting me out of my house and dragging me out of my house.
Senator, we certainly don't want that to happen. So let me go back to Ms. Ebersol, who originally proposed a pause, and see if this is palatable to her concern.
I just think that, this seems so integrated. I have to go back and look. Does this take everything out that deals with this formula, that the share cost? So everything about the share cost we're taking out.
Yes,
Is that what is
that
being
is
proposed?
that is my proposal at this point. Yes.
So everything
let me
about
just-
share cost is
Right.
out, and
Right.
then we discuss it, and then next
Decide.
month, then we
Put it
come
out.
back.
Yeah,
So
that's my
concern,
suggestion.
my concern is the share cost.
Right, that's what I
So we
thought.
need to really do a deep dive, all of us, into what this is, listening to what the counties are saying, the legislature, everyone. and then
Right.
come back and revisit the whole, anything that's related to the share cost.
Yes, and now I'm going to just ask Cassandra if that's possible to do, given what I just said. So I want to make sure that everybody's clear. So go ahead, Cassandra. Can this be done?
Yes, Madam Chair. The only provision in COMAR that includes anything with these calculated state shares is 14390205. So if you're looking at the motion as I read it, all that would be required to do this in item number 2 would be to strike 05 from the last part of that item number 2. And then we could proceed with all of the other revisions to COMAR that really allow design funding to be eligible, but exclude the state cost shares from that approval.
All right, so given that is the proposed change to the motion, again, everything out of the that section on 05 would be out until we have chance to come back and look at it again.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir?
I just want to qualify that, of course, this formula is in COMAR already, and we're following the formula. We'll get feedback certainly from Baltimore City and others about that. So the next step, as I'm understanding, I just want to make sure I know what we are going to go work on, is to look at potential changes to the formula that might be considered. And I just that as I said earlier is a pretty big lift and certainly to do in a month. But we'll certainly see what we can find out.
Yes, thank you, Bob. I appreciate your extra work on that. And I just want to remind everybody that, I've been doing this now for 5 years, and we've had the same conversations about these particular cost shares over the last 5 years, which is why we have not made changes. So I think it would be fine to do one more month on this, but I would like to be able to say that we're trying to comply with the legislation that was passed a year ago. By getting these other things done, which I think, especially for the design capacity, is very important for our school systems. And I think that part would be great to move forward. So I'll wait to see if we have a motion that modifies the proposed motion, and that is to strike the cost share from the motion, but to also to publish the rest for comment.
Madam Chair, so moved.
All right, Senator Lala has moved.
And I'll second it.
All right, and Ms. Everhart is seconded. Let's just do a roll call for this vote, Mr. Schoen.
Very good. Senator Lala,
Yes.
Ms. Everhart,
Yes.
Ms. Avara,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Senator Casemeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo,
Yes.
Secretary McCord,
Yes.
Superintendent Salmon.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. The
All
matter.
right, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for your suggestions and your patience in understanding this very complex.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I missed Mr. Fielder. Mr. Felder. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Felder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you,
passes
Clarence.
unanimously.
Thank you, Clarence. Again, thank you. Secretary McCord, question?
Yeah, just have a bit of a follow-up. I was looking at these hard this week, and I ran the per pupil cost based on the full-time enrollment on the foundation number to just get a per pupil cost of what we were supplying for this piece. And the state average is like $3,700. Baltimore Cities is above that at $4,800 per pupil. But there are 6 LEAs that have over $5,000 per pupil if you ran it per pupil on enrollments. And there are 3 that have only $1,000 per pupil. So I don't know how to fix that, and I don't know how that relates directly, but I think it could play a part. And I would just make the suggestion that run our best number on full-time enrollment against the numbers here as another way to look at it for the potential to modify. So just I haven't come up with a solution, but that I wanted to share. That's one way I was looking at it. Or what does it cost over the number of students in that LEA? How much funding is really being allocated? Knowing that, of course, if you're in a high school that's 30 years old and not getting any renovations right now, it's not really benefiting you. It's benefiting maybe students in another school that are getting a new school or getting something renovated. So it's not perfect either, but just a bare bones look at the number of students in each LEA and how that divides into the money that would be projected to be given for those LEAs. There may be some sort of balancing that can happen there also, but I just suggest that as one way to look at it and use that inquiry to potentially guide things to make sure that all of the elegance of the formulas over the years that has been added to the formulas, what we have to consider, it is a tremendous compliment to the staff to keep that straight. But in all of that elegance, we end up at the end of it with a simple calculation of how much does it cost per student to do this, and it looks kind of odd in some situations. And maybe normalizing that at the end is a suggestion that we might. It's not simply holding harmless, because that's kind of easy to do. That is a more sophisticated calculation, and a lot more thought has to go into it that, quite frankly, I wasn't qualified to, or didn't have the time to figure out. I just scratched the surface there and realized there's something going on here that we might want to take a look at. So that's all I share with the commission. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary McCord. I just want to also remind the IAC that what makes this so complex is what is happening in terms of the local contributions and the wealth of the counties. And that is a huge, huge issue.
Yes.
And I can guess, I won't say it online, but I know exactly which 3 counties are at $1,000. So that's all I'm going to say. Okay, let's move on now to the next section of our agenda, which is the Washington County Fiscal Year 2021 CIP Amendment for Western Heights Middle and North Hagerstown High Schools. Arabia Davis, our funding program manager, will be addressing this. Good morning, Arabia, and this is on page 66 of your agenda.
Good morning. During the FY21 CIP cycle, the IAC allocated funding for both the Western Heights Middle School Roof Project and the North Hagerstown High School Chiller Project. Washington County Schools recently received bids for both. For the roof project, the bids came in lower than the estimated project budget, which freed up $822,000. For the chiller project, the bids came in higher than the estimated project budget by $931,000. The total bid amount for the project is $1,831,425, and with the state share being 79%, an additional $736,000 on top of the previously allocated $711,000 is being requested. If approved, the amended total allocation for the chiller project would increase to $1,447,000. The county is concerned that without the additional funds, the project would be delayed given the county's lack of available dollars. To better understand the difference with the estimated project budgets and the actual bids, the executive director and regional facility manager met with Washington County representatives and their engineer and reviewed the county's supporting documentation that included their breakout pricing from the 3 lowest bidders. It was determined that the difference in the costs were not due to any fault of the LEAs. Their request to amend the FY21 CIP is supported by staff. The table below provides a breakdown of the IAC's original FY21 CIP allocation for these projects, funding adjustments requested by the LEA, and if approved, the amended FY21 CIP allocations, as well as the funding amount that would be reverted to the county's reserved appropriations account. I'm available for questions.
Questions for Arabia on this request?
Madam Chair, could I make a comment?
Yes, please.
So this follows what we really began with Baltimore City, in that we want projects to move forward. If the one's a little higher, one's a little lower, we want the money to shift to be able to swap between projects so that we can keep the important ones moving. So this is now spilled out to this particular LEA, and that's why we support it. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Arabia, will you read the motion, please?
Yes, to approve an amendment to the Washington County Public Schools FY 2021 CIP project allocations for the Western Heights Middle School Roof Replacement Project, decreasing the allocation from $1,873,000 to $1,051,000. Next one is North Hagerstown High School Chiller Replacement Project, increasing the allocation from $711,000 to $1,447,000, and to revert $86,000 to the reserved appropriations account for Washington County Public Schools.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved, Madam Chair, Gloria Lawler.
So moved by Senator Lawler. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Everhart. All in favor, please show or say aye.
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 Mr. Schoen?
Are there any opposed?
Sorry. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions?
The motion
Now, Mr.
carries.
Schoen. Thank
The
you.
motion carries.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Now we're going to move on to section 5 of our agenda, non-public schools program. Fred Mason, Chief of a School Facilities Branch, is here today to walk us through these two items, starting on page 67 of your agenda and ending on page 91. Good morning, Fred. Good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Salmon and members. The non-public schools safety grants provide funding on a per-pupil basis for safety-related improvements such as doors and hardware, windows, telecommunications and security systems, and corrections of unsafe site or building conditions. The minimum grant is $5,000. The maximum is $65 per student, or $85 per student at schools where more than 20% of the students would be eligible for free and reduced price meals, or schools that serve students with disabilities through the non-public placement program. The FY 2021 grants provide funding for 199 schools in 19 jurisdictions. The total appropriation was $3,500,000. No adjustments to the funding maximums were needed, and the eligible appropriations totaled $3,496,260. And I will take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Mason on the grants program? Seeing none, would you read the motion, please, Mr. Mason?
Yes, to approve FY 2021 non-public schools safety grants program project allocations as presented, totaling $3,496,260.
Mr. Lombardo?
Just a question. It would appear that there are a couple of hundred schools perhaps eligible for these grants. Is there any responsibility or requirement on the commission or staff to monitor, to oversee the expenditures or the implementation of the work?
So, Mr. Goral, could you, go ahead, Mr. Mason.
Not to physically examine the implementation of the work, but this is a reimbursement program. So the first step is what you do today to approve the allocations, and that follows review of project applications to make sure the work they intend to do is eligible based on the parameters of the program. And then when they submit for reimbursement, they are required to provide proof that they've paid their contractors, canceled check, bank statement, some type of proof of payment for completion of the work before the reimbursements are approved.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Mason, Ms. Everhart?
Yes, I read that the schools that qualify are those that are in the textbook program for
Yes.
non-public schools. And then by being in the textbook program, I also serve on the Boost Board. There's a number of discrimination requirements that the schools must adhere to. So these
Yes.
schools adhere to all those discrimination requirements?
Yes, they do. That is part of the application. Each applicant must sign an assurance form that they will adhere to all of the anti-discrimination requirements.
Okay, and you check in with the Boost Board, the Boost department to make sure that there's not any issue there?
Yes, we do.
I didn't see any, but you have 200 schools, we have 200 and some schools that we provide scholarship money to. So I just want to make sure that everything is consistent between the construction money, the textbook money, and the Boost money in meeting all the requirements.
Yes, thank you for that question. Everything is consistent across the programs providing assistance to the non-public schools.
Okay, thank you.
Clarence?
I just wanted to chime in on the question that Lombardo had asked in the statement that made in regards to the physical observance of the work. And Fred had mentioned we aren't looking at the physical aspects of it, but Bob and his teams on the maintenance side, they do through their periodic maintenance inspections, they do get to see some of the work that is done when they are scheduling those, but we are looking at the scope of work. And so that scope of work, we do verify to make sure that it's in compliance with their request. And then the IAC as well, as Fred Mason has mentioned, we are reimbursing it, making sure the scope of work did not change and that it's in harmony with what they're requesting.
All right, any other comments or questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
Move.
Mr. Lombardo, motions. Do we have a second? Mr. Gibbons, seconds. All in favor, please show or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Sean,
The motion carries.
thank you very much. All right, now we're going to move on to the section 6 under.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Salmon. There's 5B, the aging schools.
You have one more. Thank you. Go ahead, Fred. Sorry about that.
The Senator James E. Ed DeGrange Non-Public Aging Schools Program provides funds for capital improvements in non-public school facilities that are at least 16 years old. There are 3 criteria that determine the amount of the allocation. Tuition less than the statewide average per pupil expenditures for public schools. At least 20% of students eligible for free or reduced price meals is the second criteria. The third is the school facility has an average age of 50 years or more. Total appropriation was $3,500,000. Although the statutory maximum funding levels are $25,000 for one criterion, $75,000 for 2, and $100,000 for 3, or for the non-public placement schools, the number of eligible applications required prorating of the funding. The actual levels are $7,641, $22,923, and $30,564. The FY 2021 grants provide funding for 183 schools in 19 jurisdictions, totaling $3,499,578. And I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Mason? Ms. Everhart?
Same question. Textbook criteria to qualify.
Yes, textbook criteria to qualify and anti-discrimination assurance statement. And this program also follows the same eligibility review in terms of the work they intend to do before the allocation and proof of payment before reimbursement.
Other questions? All right, Mr. Secretary McCord.
It would just be nice if we got to condition this funding on their providing enrollment numbers to us. I know we can't do that right now, but we need to think about getting a handle on how many students are in the schools that we're helping with these programs. And I don't know what that would take. We need to think about that, but I think us knowing how many kids are there would be a good idea.
Secretary McCord, we do get the enrollments as part of the application process, so we can pull that data out and provide it for you next month. But we do receive that to calculate the free and reduced meals eligibility percentage. They do provide us with the enrollments.
But Mr. Mason, that's the enrollments for the schools that we're providing funding for.
Correct.
Right. So it's not like their system would provide us numbers for schools we're not providing money for. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? We have a motion to approve.
So move.
So moved by Mr.
Second.
We have a second.
Second.
Secretary McCord. All in favor, say or show aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Schoen?
The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Well, thank you. And now we'll move on to Section 6, Roland Park Emergency Design Funding Approval and COMAR Waiver, and invite Jamie Bridges, our Program Manager for Baltimore City. Good morning, Jamie. This is on pages 92 to 94 of your agenda.
And Madam Chair, we have a couple of people that Jamie will introduce from the city that are available also for questions after Jamie's presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. It's really good to see you. I'm before you to deliver item 6. It's an action item. It is the approval of a COMAR waiver and an allocation of emergency planning funding. First, I will provide some background and stand for questions, and then present the motion for your consideration. Some background on some background. HB1 requires the IAC to adopt regulations that include planning and design as eligible costs, as you heard earlier from Cassandra, and staff has initiated that COMAR revision process. But since the revisions are not complete, we need to approve a waiver of COMAR in order to approve the allocation for planning and design. So we're going to move forward with this item. Roland Park PK through 8 233 is a 180,000 square foot PK through 8 constructed in 1925. It's got additions from 1930, 1954, and 1972, and was renovated in 1990. Since 2000, the state has invested $12 million into Roland Park PK through 8 233, and the demand is high and will continue to be high according to projections. Structural issues at Roland Park have been clear to Baltimore City Public Schools and to state maintenance inspectors since at least 2015, with structural issues observed and structural investigations recommended in both the FY 2015 and FY 2019 state maintenance inspection reports. City schools included a structural investigation and repair project as a priority in its FY 2020 CIP request and in its FY 2021 CIP request, and as priority 6 in its FY 2022 CIP request, submitted in October 2020. Each time the project has been deferred due to insufficient scope development. Without a detailed structural investigation with potential solutions and budgets identified prior to the allocation of state funds for construction, the risk is high that the estimated cost requested for state allocation will not be sufficient to complete the scope, and that the project will need to be canceled and the allocation reverted and the funds moved to Baltimore City's reserves, rather than being put to work correcting other high need issues. Reverting would come at a financial cost of construction cost escalation to the state and to city schools. It would also come at an educational cost to the students, like the roof replacement and structural repair project at Furley Elementary 206, where structural issues forced the closure and replacement of the school. Even though a structural investigation had been completed prior to that project, to that allocation, the actual cost was double the estimated cost. And like I said, that was derived from a structural investigation. In the case of 233 Roland Park, even after multiple requests, a structural investigation that is detailed enough to estimate the cost has not been initiated. On January 22, a team of IAC staff met with city schools at Roland Park, PK through 8, to further explore a possible path forward on the priority project. Mahmoud, a structural engineer with the Department of General Services, detailed the conditions in a field report to the team and recommended monitoring the cracks and displacements with crack monitors and GIS, and using professional design services to perform a detailed investigation and to write the scope for the needed repair project. The report concludes that the south end of the existing 3-story school structure is currently at risk. Per a letter from City Schools dated February 5, City Schools recognize the urgent nature of the repair project and a lack of local funds needed to procure professional design services in order to start the design process. To move the project forward, City Schools is requesting an emergency allocation of state funds to procure professional design services and start the process. Based upon staff review of the request and recommendations from DGS, IAC staff recommends support of the request from City Schools for an allocation of state emergency repair funds to provide emergency professional design services for the needed structural repair project at Roland Park, PK through 8, number 233. Thank you for bearing with me on that long background. I appreciate that. I will stand for questions, and also with me in the virtual audience is Annie Chow, the Deputy COO of Baltimore City Public Schools, and Cindy Smith, the Director of Construction, Design and Construction for Baltimore City Public Schools. And they will be along for the ride on the next agenda item as well. So I will stand for questions.
I don't think we have questions, Jamie. Would you read the motion?
Wow, that is fantastic. I will indeed. The motion is to approve the waiver of COMAR 143902-11C as requested by Baltimore City Public Schools and approved by the Assistant Attorney General for legal sufficiency, so that design funding will be an eligible expense for an emergency structural repair project at Roland Park, PK through 8, and the transfer of $76,800 from the Emergency Repair Fund to establish an allocation for professional design services for early planning for an emergency structural repair project at the Roland Park PK through 8 233.
Do we have a motion to approve? Senator Lala has made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lombardo made the second. All in favor, please say or show aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Schoen?
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, members. Now, Jamie, would you please move to the next item, which is a cancellation for Baltimore Public Schools of the 2020 Southside Building. This is part of the Healthy School Fund project, and it's on pages 95 to 98 of your agenda. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's still good to be here and good to see you. And I will start with some background, stand for questions, and then present the motion for your consideration. Some background includes the Healthy School Facility Fund. Administrative Procedures Guide requires project allocations uncontracted after final reimbursement of approved project to be transferred back to the fund in reserve for reallocation to other eligible projects. Per the letter dated November 19, 2020, City Schools requested the cancellation of one FY 2020 HSFF project because City Schools does not intend to complete the project. At the January 14 meeting, the IAC, a motion to approve the request to cancel the project was postponed, and more information on the project and the building were requested. In particular, members wanted to know that the school is safe, if the VPU project at 181 could be completed, and of City Schools' long-term plan for school number 181. At the time, City Schools provided immediate assurance that the school is safe, and in particular, that the fire alarm is operational. Since then, staff confirmed that City Schools does not intend to complete the project. Also, City Schools communicated that the long-term plan for the school and the portfolio of schools in general has been and will continue to be considered as part of the annual portfolio review process, but that all recommendations must be vetted within City Schools and with local stakeholders before they can be shared with state agencies and the general public. Without a long-term solution, the Southside building, with a state-rated capacity of more than 1,100 students, will continue to be one of the most underutilized school buildings in the City Schools portfolio, regardless of the physical condition of the building or the academic programs offered, due in large to the significant and sustained demographic change on the Cherry Hill Peninsula. While the population of Cherry Hill did not decline at the same rate as Baltimore City as a whole in recent years, the number of students at Cherry Hill enrolled did fall from 584 in 2010 to 386 in 2017. In addition, the students from Cherry Hill enrolled in high school are even more mobile than Baltimore City students as a whole. In fact, 1 in 10 switches schools during a given school year. So a decline in enrollment at the high school in Cherry Hill over the same period is understandable. For school year 2018-19, enrollment at the high school in Cherry Hill located in the Southside building, the New Era Academy, fell to 288, and utilization of the entire Southside building fell to 27%. The fall in enrollment at 181 occurred despite significant efforts to stabilize the enrollment. For example, in school year 2014-15, City Schools relocated the Maritime Industries Academy with an enrollment of 420 to the Southside building 181. And City Schools supported the relocation of the program with extensive interior renovations. But enrollment in the program fell to 127 within a couple years, and the Maritime program closed at the end of school year 2015-16. In the foreseeable future, City Schools projects enrollment to remain in the low to mid 300s and utilization to remain below 33%. Around 100,000 square feet of underutilized space will continue to be a significant financial problem in the foreseeable future, with an estimated additional cost to operate and maintain of more than $1.7 million per year until a long-term solution can be identified and implemented. Staff recommends approval of the request to cancel the FY 2020 Healthy School Facility Fund project, the installation of VPUs at the Southside building, number 181, and to transfer the project allocation of $896,682 as detailed in the motion. I stand for questions, as does Amy Chow and Cindy Smith as needed.
I think Lynette has joined also, Madam Chair, Lynette Washington.
Thank you. Questions for Jamie and any of the other guests? All right, hearing none, read the motion, please, Jamie.
I will indeed. The motion is to approve the cancellation of the Baltimore City Public Schools FY 2020 Healthy School Facility Fund Vertical Package Air Conditioning Unit Project at the Southside Building number 181, and the transfer of the project allocation of $896,682 to the Healthy School Facility Fund for reallocation to other eligible Healthy School Facility Fund projects in the state.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Move.
Senator Casemeyer. Do we have a second? Is that Mr.
Second.
All right, Mr. Lombardo. All right, all in favor, please say or show aye.
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 Any abstentions?
The motion carries.
All right, thank you. I just want to since we do have our Baltimore folks online, I just want to, since I have visited that school, I think Bob was with me that day. I really, when you tell us that it's safe, I want you to continue to make sure that it is safe for our students that are there. They are some of our most vulnerable students. And, it's one thing to say it'll be part of the review, but I really hope that you all are looking at that for a better solution than is currently available. So I'll just make that comment. All right, Jamie, you move on to the last section of our update on Baltimore City's HVAC status report, found on pages 99 to 100 in your agenda.
I sure can. I'm still here and happy to deliver item 8, an informational item on the extra $15 million for HVAC projects in Baltimore City. As you said, item 8 can be found on page 99. And I appreciate everybody for bearing with everyone on this meeting. It's been full of really complicated and important project topics. So I'll just get right to it. Starting out with project phase. Since last month, one project has moved from procurement to construction. That's Windsor Hills. And one more has become operational, and that would be the chiller project at Highlandtown. That leaves us with 12 of the 19 projects operational at this time, or over 60%. As far as status goes, we have 2 projects managing by exception that are behind Harlem Park, and that was originally due to some coordination issues with local utilities, also some lead time on product, and Callaway, which is the last project and has been was reserved to really make sure that other priority projects can be completed for the money. I'd also note, as far as exceptions goes, Margaret Brent was completed last month or the month before, and that was 7 months early. And Tench Tillman is motoring ahead and looks to be about to be completed and operational, and that will be 5 months early. So that is pretty exciting. The City Schools has been making some hay on that. And then finally, moving into the contract status. Currently, we have 15 million of 15 million allocated, and we have a total of $13.5 million that has been contracted. That's up $3 million since the last month, and we are about 90%. We also have a total of $7.113 million that has been expended, and that's up close to $500,000 from last month. I will mention that those are state allocations. Totally, we have about $16.6 million under contract. So basically, we have quite a bit of local investment from Baltimore City. They've got about $3 million so far additionally contracted in order to make sure these projects get completed. So, there's been a lot of work on a lot of sides to get this done, and we're humming along pretty well. It's been, I think, enjoyable for us to see this progress every month. It really puts us on the ground and with a good view of how this works. And we could not be seeing this if it weren't for Cindy Smith allowing me to badger her every month for a very detailed project update. And so, again, that is the story on the Baltimore extra 15 for HVAC projects. If there are any questions, I am available.
Questions or comments for Jamie? Secretary McCord.
Well, it's not as exciting as Pimlico. It is really nice to see people making it to the end here. And it's a lot of work on behalf of Baltimore City. I understand that. A lot of good work on behalf of the IAC. So together, I congratulate you on keeping these projects moving. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Baltimore City.
Thank you, Jamie. Good work. What gets measured gets done. It's obvious from your work on that. So thank you very much. And just like to take a point of privilege as chair. Yesterday, I was in St. Mary's County visiting schools, and I got to see you talk about seeing the work of the IAC. Got to see the new split seam metal roof at Green Holly Elementary School. It was quite impressive. This has a 30 to 50 year life,
Yes.
covering an old shingle roof. It also has added insulation under the roof to make it more energy efficient. It's gray on the main section and green on the entry tower canopy to match the school colors and add a little curb appeal. It's really exciting. The other fun fact that they shared with me yesterday is that the contractor had at least 2 females on their roofing team. So we celebrate the work of our women on that project as well. So it really was it was a very neat looking roof, and wanted to let everybody know that it's great to see the work of the money that we put out for these projects. So just wanted to share that. And now I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right.
So moved.
Second. Did we lose her?
Yeah, Dr. Seaman, you're mute.
Sorry, we have a second from Mr. Gibbons. And all in favor, please say or show aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Schoen.
The motion carries.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank for the public that were with us today. And everyone, please
Thank
stay
you.
safe. Practice all the right mitigation strategies.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you now. Thanks.